The chief executive of Israeli giant Teva, the world's biggest generic pharmaceutical firm, resigned. According to the Israeli press, CEO Jeremy Levin quit following a fight with company's board of directors. Senior management had sent a letter to the board of directors that their intervention prevented them from managing Teva effectively. Teva's broad board and management were at odds owing to public criticism over the company's tax benefits and planned layoffs. 2 weeks ago, Teva announced it would cut 10% of its workforce, or 5,000 employees, to save $2 billion by 2017. I'm sorry. And with me is Gilad Alper, Senior Analyst of Excellence Nesua Brokerage. Thank you very much for coming to our studio.
Thanks for having me.
So how serious is this resignation for Teva?
It's very serious. Teva is in a crisis. They're in a crisis because they have one product called Copaxone, which accounts for almost 50% of their earnings. And that particular product is already facing tough competition. And as early as May 2014, competition can get a lot worse when Copaxone is going to see generic competition entering the market. And Teva needs to find a replacement for this one product that, as I said, accounts for 50% of its earnings, which is why they hired Jeremy Levin only a year and a half ago to try and outline or generate or implement a strategy to get over the crisis. And replacing Jeremy Levin right now, long before Teva can actually find a solution to the problem, is only making the problem that much worse.
Let's just try to explain to our viewers who are not living in Israel, who don't know that Teva is actually one of the big pharmaceutical companies in the world.
Teva is actually the largest generic pharmaceutical company in the world. It is the largest company in Israel by far. Revenues of about $20 billion, by far the largest exporter in Israel. And for more than a decade, it's been the most successful, most highly regarded public company in Israel. They've kind of entered a serious crisis about 3 years ago or 4 years ago, depending exactly when you want to, to cut it. And they've been trying to get over that crisis for the past 2 years, 3 years. And a lot of people's money is invested in that stock. This is the most widely held public company in Israel. So this is obviously a focus of public attention.
So this is not the first time that Teva is having a hard time. How is it going to recover in the next few months from this? And if it's a big problem right now, this resignation.
Well, there are two scenarios that can develop over the next year or so. In one scenario, Copaxone, as I said, the one big product, actually sees generic competition or needs to deal with the generic competition, in which case Teva is in a very, very serious crisis, at the end of which it might actually lose its status as an independent company and get acquired by a larger company, which is bad news for Israel. On another scenario, competition gets a little bit later, and then Teva has a fighting chance. But it's going to be complicated, whatever, which way it happens. Teva is going to find it very tough to find now a CEO as talented and as capable as Jeremy Levin, and things can actually get a lot worse from down here.
So how is it going to affect actually the Israeli economy?
Well, the effect can take place in a few ways. Firstly, well, we know already that Teva wants to lay off about 800 people in Israel. That's bad enough. But the real problem, the real crisis that can inflict the Israeli economy is that Teva is the largest exporter in Israel, which means we can see, theoretically, billions of dollars of export vanishing over the next few years. In which case, well, obviously export is going to come down, the Israeli shekel is going to weaken significantly, and the cost of living is going to skyrocket. And even now, Israelis are complaining about the cost of living. If we see the largest exporter in Israel losing its status very quickly over the next few years, then people are going to, look back to these days in,
It's going to be.
It's going to be tough.
Maybe it's the days that we don't want to remember.
Yeah.
Gilad Alper, thank you very much for this and for this insight on the subject, and we are continuing.